as felony property crimes, it's 32.3% versus 24.3%. And the same is true when we talk about felony drug offenses. The whole point is that what we've learned over a course of time is that women in our society, in our community, enter into the criminal justice system through different pathways than men. Of course, there are issues related that are obvious to all of you who have been privy to hearing other testimony. There are issues related to mental health and substance abuse and poverty, etc. For women, it's a little bit more different. It's a little different because so many of them, a vast majority of them, have suffered trauma, whether it be sex abuse or whether it be physical abuse. What we intend to hopefully accomplish is to break a cycle, to provide services through intensive probation, as well as intensive judicial monitoring that will provide for a pathway that leads women, or these women who have entered into the system, an opportunity to become contributors in our community as opposed to wards of the state. And we ask that you support this bill, and I'm more than happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Judge. And I forgot to mention, all testifiers, there is a 2-minute limit on testimony. I'll ask you to conclude and summarize your testimony if you do reach that time. Next up, for under HB 2421, we have the Women's Prison Project in support.
Thank you. My name is Linda Rich, and I'm testifying on behalf of the Women's Prison Project. We strongly support this measure. I could practically re-quote Judge Browning's testimony when I look at my own. We have an extreme number of women in the prison system, and one of the things that I would like to highlight is the fact that 75% of them are mothers of minor children. 60% of them had their children living with them before incarceration. And we know that there is incredible damage to young children when their parent or their mother is incarcerated. There are developmental problems, behavioral problems, documented health problems, attention deficit disorder. And we know about the pipeline to prison, the intergenerational transmission of the risk for incarceration. So this court would keep more women in their homes with their children, of course, with the supervision and support of the court, but would address the pathways to criminality and recidivism that are unique to women and require a different approach to rehabilitation. So we urge you to pass this bill, and thank you so much for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you. That's the last testifier we have on this measure. Members, any questions? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to the regular course of the agenda, HB 1624, relating to the crime victim compensation fee. First up, we have the Office of the Public Defender in opposition.
Good afternoon, committee members, chair, vice chair. My name is Ben Lowenthal. I'm a deputy public defender assigned to the Maui office. The Office of the Public Defender strongly opposes this bill. We'll stand on the written testimony, and I wish to add that out of my cases in the circuit court, I also am responsible for the rural courts, including Hana District Court. And I can say that much of the calendar is taken up with proof of compliance hearings of extremely vulnerable and indigent people who repeatedly have to come back to court to explain why they cannot have money to pay the fee from the last time. By taking away the discretion of the sentencing court in determining and assessing the person standing before them, whether they have the ability to pay a fee or whether we're going to be expending needless resources to have them continuing come back to court, it will only harm the community more. And sadly, the Crime Victim Compensation Commission will still be struggling with the lack of funds. So this bill does not accomplish the purpose that it sets out to and will only harm the community. I am happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next up, we have Department of Public Safety and Support. Department of Public Safety? Are they not online? Okay. All right. Next up, we have the Crime Victims Compensation Commission in support.
Thank you very much. This is Pam, Chair and Vice Chair members. My name is Pam Ferguson-Bray, the Executive Director of the Crime Victim Compensation Commission. As you know, the Crime Victim Compensation Commission was set up to help violent crime victims in Hawaii cover costs not covered by other sources like medical expenses, mental health counseling, and funeral expenses. Every single state has a program like the Compensation Commission. We strongly support this bill, which mandates the compensation fee, which is the primary funding source for the Crime Victim Compensation Commission. This fee was created by the legislature in 1998 to act as a primary funding source for the Crime Victim Compensation Commission. Sadly, compensation fee collection shortfalls that are caused by judges failing to order the fee in eligible cases have deprived the commission of the funding reserve it needed to survive the pandemic period. These funding shortfalls put the commission in danger of closing, and had the legislature not provided us with an emergency funding allocation last year, the only state funding that we've gotten since 2003, the commission would have closed. While the judiciary pledged to address this issue, they pledged to address the issue because they were not ordering the fee in all eligible cases, which were the cases where clearly it can be afforded. While they pledged to address these shortfalls, we got a letter from the administrative director last year in January. Instead, what has happened is that there's an 8% reduction in the amount of revenue that we see this year. Because of that reduction, we're in the same place that we were last time. If this issue is not addressed, or the legislature does not provide an alternate funding source, the commission will close. We are currently half-staffed, we are cut to the bone, and I can say that we are not able to provide the timely service that we want to clients of victims of violent crime in our state because of that half-staffing. Our testimony details the efforts made by our program and the legislature and the judiciary itself over 2 decades in an attempt to address this problem.
Thank you. That was 2 minutes. If you could just conclude your testimony.
Okay, if you look at the survey that we did on the last page, what we found since the promise of the judiciary to address this issue is a survey of 75 cases in family court showed only 24% of those cases was the compensation fee ordered, as opposed to Kauai in a 2-month period, 100% of compensation cases were awarded. This shows to us the judiciary has no standards or criteria to assess whether or not to order the fee, and that the issues that the judiciary sought to address to make sure that we could become fiscally self-sufficient have not been addressed. And we believe this bill is the only way to address them. Thank you very much. I am available for questions.
Okay, thank you. Next up, we have Honolulu prosecutors in support. There are a lot of hearings going on right now. Maybe people have other ones they're attending. All right, members, that's the last testifier we have for this bill. Any questions? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to HB 1625 relating to the Crime Victims Compensation Special Fund. First up, we have the Crime Victims Compensation Commission again in support.
Good afternoon. Just very briefly, this bill actually will reduce expenses for the commission by waiving an assessment that we pay every year, sort of a tax on the money that we take in. Last year, we paid $66,000. The year before that, $86,000. This will help us greatly in addressing the funding shortfalls that we have. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Next up, we have Honolulu prosecutors in support. Or not? Well, we have plenty of people in support of this bill who are not here too. Members, any questions? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to HB 1690 relating to child passenger restraint systems. First up, we have Department of Transportation in support.
Mr. Chairman, Patrick McCain, Department of Transportation. We support the intent of the bill and will stand on our testimony. Thank you very much, sir.
Okay, thank you. I have another Department of Transportation, Christy Hauser, also in support. Is Christy here? Or Patrick, did you take that for DOT?
Yeah,
Okay.
we're all in support. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next up, we have Honolulu Police Department in support.
Yes, good afternoon, Chair Nakashima and Vice Chair Matayoshi. I'm Brian Lynch, Major of District 7, East Honolulu of the Honolulu Police Department, City and County of Honolulu. The Honolulu Police Department supports the passage of House Bill 1690 relating to child passenger restraint systems, and we stand on our written testimony.
Okay, thank you. And congratulations on your promotion, Captain. So he's calling you Captain Lynch. All right, next up, we have HPH in support.
Hi, Lisa Dow with Kapiolani Medical Center. Yes, we support the intent of this bill, but we ask that we make some changes to this bill, specifically with increasing the age for the booster from 8 to 10 years, as well as to remove the exemptions, particularly under section 1, number 4B, with regards to the 40-pound exemption and the lap shoulder belt exemption as well. We believe this endangers children.
Okay, thank you. Next up, we have the Keiki Injury Prevention Coalition with comments.
This is Karen Tessier for Keiki Injury Prevention Coalition. We also support the intent of this bill, and we strongly support requiring children to ride rear facing until at least age 2. We have the same concerns as Lisa Dow just mentioned with the other exemptions in the bill. There are many dangerous exemptions in the bill that need to be addressed. And there are 2 bills that were carried over from last session that do address these, Senate Bill 152 and House Bill 1090 that are actively being heard this session. So we feel that those are both superior bills to this one. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. That's all the testifiers we have. Members, any questions? Rep. Nakamura.
I have a question for Hawaii Pacific Health, Lisa Dow. I wanted to know the other exemption for children who are over 4 feet, 9 inches in height, should that remain?
Sorry.
I know you had
yes.
the concern. I know you have the concern about the weight.
Yeah, right. The weight limit is a big concern because children under 40 pounds and even children above 40 pounds and surely under 4 feet 9 inches should remain in some type of restraint system. Typically, the 4 feet 9 inches is typically a child between 10 to 12 years of age. And at that point, they typically fit an adult seatbelt a whole lot better than under 4 feet 9. And that's just kind of like a basic, it's an easy way for police officers and others to kind of get a basis on how to judge probably a proper fit for a seatbelt. But the best way is to actually have the child sit in the seat and the seatbelt fit properly like you and I.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Members, any further questions? If not, we'll move on to HB 1692 relating to mobile electronic devices. First up, we have, well, the only testifier we have is the Department of Transportation in support.
Mr. Chairman, we will stand on our testimony and we're grateful for you giving us the time. Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you. Members, any questions? Seeing none, we'll move on to HB 1886 relating to controlled substances. First up, we have the Department of Health in support.
Good afternoon, Chair, Vice Chair, and committee members. My name is Greg Edwards with the Department of Health, Food and Drug Branch. The department stands on our written testimony and support. I will be available for any questions you may have.
Okay, thank you. Next up, we have HPD in support. Oh, you're muted.
Sorry about that. Good afternoon. This is Captain Tate Nojima, Narcotics Vice Division. Good afternoon, Chair and members of the board. We're in support of House Bill, 1886, and we stand on testimony. I am open to any questions.
Okay,
Thank you.
Thank you. Members, that's all the testifiers we have for this measure. Any questions? Right, seeing none, we'll move on to HB 1965 relating to property forfeiture. First up, we have the Department of the Attorney General in support.
Good afternoon, Chair Nakashima and members of the committee. I'm Deputy Attorney General Steve Bumalag. The Department of the Attorney General supports this bill, and our reasons are in our written testimony and support. I'm available to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you. Next up, we have Department of Public Safety in opposition.
Hi, good afternoon, Vice Chair. For some reason, I cannot start my video, but we stand on our written testimony in opposition of this bill. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next up, HPD in opposition.
Good afternoon again. We stand opposed to this bill, and I stand on my written testimony. I'm open to any questions.
Okay, thank you. And last up, we have the prosecutor's office in opposition. Must be a lot of trials right now. All right, that's all the testifiers. Members, any questions? All right, hearing none, moving on to HB 2073, making appropriations for claims against the state, its officers, or its employees. We've got one testifier today, AG's office in support.
Good afternoon, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. Karen Inagaki, Deputy Attorney General. This bill currently contains 8 claims that total $938,613.47. There is an attachment A to our testimony that provides a brief description of each claim. And we ask that this bill be passed, and I am available for any questions. Thank you.
All right, members, any questions? Seeing none, we'll move on to HB 1777 relating to the commercial sexual exploitation of children. First up, we have the AG's office with comments.
Aloha, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. I'm Deputy Attorney General and State Human Trafficking Coordinator Fashad Talebi. While an annual report to the legislature providing the statewide data pertaining to commercial sexual exploitation of children would be helpful in our assessment and improving the state's anti-trafficking response, the department does have concerns about the bill as written and provided recommendations in our written testimony. So thank you for considering our comments, and I'm available for any questions.
Okay, thank you. Next up, we have the HPH Sex Abuse Treatment Center in support. Okay. I don't think they're present. That's all the testifiers we have here today. Members, any questions? Seeing none, we'll move on to HB 2077 relating to employees of the Department of the Attorney General. We have one testifier today, the AG's office in support.
Good afternoon, Chair, Vice Chair, and committee members. I am Deputy Attorney General Grant Governor. We support HB 2077, which would convert 2 supervisor positions within the Department of the Attorney General from civil service status to exempt status, bringing them in line with our other 23 divisions headed by supervisors who are also exempt. We don't anticipate any costs associated with this bill. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Members, any questions? Rep. Nakamura.
Yeah, I'd like to know, can you repeat that again? How many division heads do you have in the Attorney General's office?
I believe we have 25 and 23 are exempt at this time.
23 are exempt.
Yes.
So these are the 2 remaining civil servant positions.
Yes. Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Members, any other questions?
Yeah, I have a question.
Yep, Rep. Tokioka.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Mr. Halverson, so are there any issues with collective bargaining? Are these 2 employees who are civil service, are they in a bargaining unit?
Just to clarify, you said Mr. Halverson. He's here, but I'm speaking.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Frank Uenter. Are there any issues you said with regard to collective bargaining?
Yes. So these are civil service employees. I'm assuming they're part of a union bargaining unit.
I believe they are civil service, so that would be correct.
Okay, so the 23 others, have they always been exempt?
I couldn't say always. I don't know. I have to go back and check to find out. But as far as I know, it's been quite a while that's the case, if not indefinitely. But I can find out for you.
Okay. Well, we're going to be voting on this bill in probably like half an hour. So I just have some concerns if we're following the protocols of collective bargaining and trying to make sure that we're not overstepping our boundaries.
Well, we haven't identified any issues that would suggest that there's a impropriety in doing this.
Okay. Thank you, Vice Chair.
Thank you, members. Any further questions? If not, I have one for AGs. One of the positions is the Chief Special Investigator of the Department of the Attorney General. I'm wondering the duties of this person. Is that person responsible for internal investigations or what is their job duties?
Their job duties are all investigations. They essentially supervise all the investigators. And so despite, regardless of which type of investigation, that investigator, the chief investigator would be the supervisor for that section.
Okay, I'm just wondering if there is a risk to making this position more of a political appointment rather than a civil service appointment. Hence, if it was an internal investigator, I could see that being a little worse to have as a non-long-term employee if the person is serving at the will of the governor or whatnot. I'm not sure if you see where I'm going here. Looks confused.
I don't know if you're asking if there's a direction that would come from the governor that would end up to the chief investigator. I could look into that. I don't expect that would be normal.
I suppose my question is, can the chief investigator, is making the chief investigator's position an appointed position and therefore a little more political by taking it out of the civil service arena? Is there any danger to that in their investigations themselves? Or can that be misconstrued as injecting bias into this position?
I don't think there's any indication that would be true. The attorney general would simply pick the best candidate for the position, qualifications, etc.
I'm not sure that's what actually happens in reality all the time, which is why I'm a little concerned if this investigator position, especially as an internal investigator, but generally too, I'm worried that if we do make it a little more political, that would be bad.
Well, the investigators, still always reports to the attorney general.
Right.
And so in that sense, it's a procedure a standard type of procedure. It's not political. I don't know if that answers your question, but
no, I mean, that's okay. I'll discuss it with the other members. It's good to know that the chief investigator just oversees all other investigations in the office.
Yeah,
that's fair.
And just to go back, I think there was a question earlier. My understanding is these two positions are excluded from collective bargaining.
Okay, yeah. Another issue. Rep. Tokioka, did you have a question?
He answered the question from previously, yeah.
Okay. Members, any further questions? If not, I'm sorry, with your indulgence, I'd like to go back to HB 1777. I forgot to ask a question to the Department of the Attorney General. Is Farshad still online? Is he still online? Not responding. Oh, there he is.
Sorry, I stepped away for a second. I thought I was off the hook.
My fault. So one of the testifiers requested that this report be made public and available on your website, on the AG's website. I'm wondering if that would be an issue for any kind of privacy violations, or if reports like this are generally already available upon request by another party.
Typically a legislative report. We just did one based on a resolution from last session and sent that over, and it's a public report. I'd have to, double check with the department about posting on the website, but since it is issued publicly, I would guess it wouldn't be an issue.
Okay, so if this testifier, and if this testifier is listening, this is good information for them. If this testifier reached out to your office to request this report, it would be freely given?
Most likely we would have the ability to do that, but it would likely be, someone above me that makes that call.
Okay, no, thank you. Appreciate it. All right, let's move on to HB 2078. Making an emergency appropriation to the Department of the Attorney General. First up, we have the Attorney General's office in support. John, your mic might be off or not working.
Good afternoon. I'm Deputy Attorney General John Price for the department. We of course support the request since we're making it. I would point out that we have an unusual number of high dollar cases going on at this time. And as all of you who had anything to do with litigation in the past know, expert witnesses don't come cheap, and they are important tools in presenting a case effectively. And that's essentially the reason why we're asking for this appropriation. Just to brag a little, we did complete a case last year that involved a substantial amount of expert testimony. We started out as the defendant in a breach of contract suit. And through the litigation process, we turned that around on a counterclaim to where we actually collected over $30 million from the party who started out suing us. So it can make a big difference in a lawsuit. As the financial people are fond of saying, past results does not guarantee future performance, but it would be good to have the ability to utilize experts where the need arises. And I submit that we're in need at this time. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Members, any questions? Seeing none, we'll move on to HB 1759, relating to legal services for low-income immigrants. First up, we have the Filipina Advocacy Network in support.
Hello, thank you very much. We appreciate you hearing this. Really will be a very good service that's needed in our community, and I stand by my written testimony.
Okay, thank you, Amy. Next up, we have the Hawaii Coalition for Immigrant Rights in support.
Aloha, Chair Matayoshi and Liza Rango. I'm here just to stand on our testimony in support for the Hawaii Coalition for Immigrant Rights, and just reiterate that this is something that the almost 20% of our population of the state deserve. So thank you.
Good, thank you. Next up, we have the Hawaii Friends of Civil Rights in support.
Good afternoon, Chair and Vice Chair. This is Pat McManaman for the Hawaii Friends of Civil Rights. We stand in strong support of this measure and rest on our testimony. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And that's all the testifiers we have here today. Members, any questions? Right, seeing none, we'll move on to HB 1843 relating to civil legal services. First up, we have legal aid in support.
Aloha, good afternoon. Nalani Fujimori Kaina, Executive Director with the Legal Aid Society of Hawaii. Wanted to just ask for the support, strong support of this bill. Over 2021, Legal Aid received over 19,000 requests for services, and we're able to serve about 8,000 of those cases. Our organization provides services in family, housing, consumer, foreclosure, public benefits, elder law, homelessness, immigration, language access, and child welfare. So we provide a gamut of civil legal services to the poor across the state through 10 offices. 30% of our clients were homeless or at risk for homelessness, 17% were victims of domestic violence, and 11% spoke a language other than English. So we are asking for support of this bill and to insert the amount of $750,000 for the support of general civil legal services across the state. Thank you again for the opportunity to testify and happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Next up, we have Volunteer Legal Services Hawaii in support.
Good afternoon, Chair, Vice Chair, and members of the Committee on Judiciary Hawaiian Affairs. My name is Rachel Figueroa, and I'm the Executive Director of Volunteer Legal Services Hawaii, testifying in support of Hawaii Bill.
All right, Rachel, give us 1 second. Does someone have their, what's that sound? Rachel, is there a phone ringing behind you or something?
There was one in the background.
Okay, sorry, please continue.
Okay. Volunteer Legal receives no federal funds and have received funds like IOLTA, ILAF, and private donations. However, this is not enough to sustain us, and we have been dipping into our reserves. Despite the limited funding, we think we have been able to continue virtually, qualifying and serving over 1,000 clients last year with just a staff of 7. Thank you for your time and consideration of this critical appropriation to assist in continuing our services as we emerge from the pandemic. I'm available for questions after.
Thank you. Members, any questions? Rep. Nakamura.
Is someone from the judiciary testifying on this?
I don't know.
I do not. We don't have anyone present, but they
Okay.
did submit written testimony in support.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, seeing no further questions, we'll move on to HB 1761 relating to identification cards. First up, we have Hawaii Friends of Civil Rights in support.
Good afternoon again, Chair. We stand in very strong support of this bill. Would particularly note that the identification cards will assist many in our community, and the need for it has been greatly heightened by COVID-19. As you know, you can't enter into restaurants, public buildings, public facilities without an identification card. There are many individuals in our community who cannot secure other identification because of misplaced birth certificates. We have somebody in our extended family born in New York. New York has lost his birth certificate, and it's been a very cumbersome process for him, including working with attorneys to try and prove that he's a valid citizen of the United States. So this measure will assist not only citizens who can't find IDs, but immigrants, homeless persons, individuals being released from prison. We stand in strong support. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next up, we have the Filipina Advocacy Network in support.
Thank you. My name is Amy Agbayan. I do represent the Filipina Advocacy Network. I'm also a member of the Legal Clinic. We strongly support this bill. And we also want to thank the legislature for passing a similar bill before, which is for unlimited purpose driver's licenses. And that bill is, this bill is very similar to that. And that opportunity allowed a lot of individuals to be able to drive, but we also need an ID for people who don't want to drive or cannot drive, but have many of the same issues. So we do strongly support this, and it will be very practical and can be implemented easily.
Okay, thank you. Next up, we have Hawai'i Coalition for Immigrant Rights in support.
Aloha, Chair and Vice Chair, members of the committee. I am Liza Rangel and testifying for Hawai'i Coalition for Immigrant Rights with more than 20 to 25 immigrant serving organizations. Just two very salient things as to why this is important now. With Real ID coming on board and the transition to needing more paperwork to get a real ID. A lot of folks do not have access to that paperwork and therefore not able to get one. And then also with restaurants and other government agencies and buildings needing some type of identification to verify your vaccination. A lot of folks just do not have access to any type of ID that would allow them to participate in just normal life. So this is seeking to address that, useful for immigrants, folks that don't have all of their paperwork, and those that might be unhoused. So appreciate your time and attention on this.
Thank you. That's all the testifiers we have here today. Members, any questions? Okay, hearing none, we'll move on to HB 1883 relating to elections. First up, we have Office of Elections with comments.
Good afternoon. The Office of Elections stands on its written testimony providing comments, and we'll be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have the Office of Language Access in support.
Good afternoon, Chair Nakashima, Vice Chair Matayoshi, Afirakbam Nuran from the Office of Language Access. We stand on our written testimony in support of the intent of this measure and will be available for any question the committee may have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next up, we have the City and County's Office of the City Clerk with comments.
Aloha, Chair Nakashima, Vice Chair Matayoshi, and members of the Judiciary and Hawaiian Affairs Committee. Thank you for the opportunity to testify on HB 1883. Adding a little bit to our written testimony, I'd like to briefly explain the approach that was taken in the past to provide multilingual support in elections. Multilingual support mainly focused on those languages required by the Federal Voting Rights Act. For Honolulu, it would be Filipino and Chinese, or more specifically, Ilocano and Mandarin. The county of Maui is covered under Filipino, and the counties of Kauai and Hawaii are not covered by any language under the Voting Rights Act. VRA compliance entails the translation of the full array of voter information available to English-speaking voters. This includes brochures, forms, signage, website, and most importantly, the ballot. That being said, support for languages not covered under the VRA is left to the discretion and resources of the various election offices. For the 2020 election, recognizing the significant change in the election scheme, the city produced a primer explaining the mechanics of voting in the 2 languages required by the VRA, but added 15 additional languages, one of which was Hawaiian. We think this was an effort that was positive and the first step in enhancing accessibility to the elections process. To that end, we would be supportive of language stating that translations are available on the outgoing mail ballot envelope. Thank you for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you. Next up, we have Common Cause Hawaii in support.
Good afternoon, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. We thank you for hearing this important measure, HB 1883. We support it, and you have our written testimony before you. We support having notice of language translation services in Hawaiian and at a minimum, at least 5 other languages other than English provided on the outside of the envelope where the ballot is mailed to voters. As we all know, voting is a fundamental political right, preservative of all other rights. Hawaii is the most diverse state in the nation, and we need to make sure that our population is able to fully and meaningfully participate in this important electoral process. And so thank you again for hearing this important measure to make sure that everyone, every voting citizen is able to fully and meaningfully participate in our elections. And I'm available to answer any questions. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. Next up, we have Stonewall Caucus of the Democratic Party of Hawaii in support.
Good afternoon, Michael Galoyu Jr. on behalf of the Stonewall Caucus. Happy Lunar New Year. On behalf of the caucus, we stand in full support of this bill. As we saw in the last election cycle, when you remove barriers, more people do vote, and we saw historic numbers. And so this is just one more way to help remove those barriers so people don't throw away their ballot by mistake. And it will save the county's money so they don't have to reprint and resend when someone says they didn't get a ballot. So mahalo for the opportunity to testify in strong support.
Thank you. And last up, we have Hawaii Coalition for Immigrant Rights in support.
Yes, thank you so much, Chair and Vice Chair, members of the committee. We're also standing in support of this bill. And just a little fact for everybody about, Hawaii has a very large proportion of immigrants. About 18% of our population is foreign born. About half of that population are American citizens. And so that is, I think, important to think about, when we're thinking about language access. There are a lot of folks in our community that struggle, about 1 in 9 as limited English proficient, but they are American citizens, and we need to make sure that they are enfranchised in every possible way, especially as we see rights being degraded in other places. So mahalo and thank you for your time.
Thank you. Members, any questions? Seeing none, we'll move on to HB 1890 relating to elections. First up, we have OHA in support. Office of Hawaiian Affairs, are you there? All right, next up, we have DHHL in support.
Aloha, Vice Chair, we stand in our testimony and support.
Okay, thank you. Next up, we have the State Council on Developmental Disabilities in support.
Good afternoon, Chair Nakashima and Vice Chair Matayoshi. Hawaii State Council on Developmental Disabilities stands on the testimony that we've submitted for HB 2511 in honor of the late Mrs. Elizabeth Lopez. Thank you for your time. Available for questions.
Okay, thank you. Next up, we have Tax Foundation of Hawaii with comments.
Thank you, Chair, members. Tom Yamachika from Tax Foundation of Hawaii. Our comments relate not to the appropriation of $600 million, which we think is a great idea if we can do it. But we do have lots of concerns about whether the agency can spend the money it's been given. I've attached to our testimony, it's on the second page, the current status of their federal grants under NAHASDA. It shows that the department still has not expended the large part of its grant from 2015. As a result, the feds we don't need any more money, so they didn't give us any money in 2016. We've gotten $2 million each in 2017, 18, 19, not a penny of which has been expended or encumbered. And so we have concerns about, hey, if we give DHHL $600 million, are they going to do anything about it? Do they have the ability to do anything about it? We would like to think that they do, but we need to take care of some problems at this agency. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you. And I hear that OHA is back. So OHA in support.
Stand on a written testimony. Thank you.
All right. Next up, we have the Council for Native Hawaiian Advancement in support.
Aloha, Sterling Wong for CNHA. CNHA is in strong support of HB 2511. This much needed and long overdue funding would go a long way to housing the 28,000 Native Hawaiians on the wait list. Mahalo nui. Available for comments.
Okay, thank you. Next up, we have the Hawaiian Community Development Board in support. Hawaiian Community Development Board. All right, we have a number of individuals giving testimony all in support, or for written testimony all in support. But Momilani, you're up.
Mahalo, and aloha Chair Nakashima, Vice Chair Matayoshi, and members of the committee. I'm Homilani Shadell, a beneficiary residing in Molokai, a homestead leader in Kapolei, and an advocate for the Hawaiian Homelands Trust. I appreciate the crafting of this bill, for it recognizes and acknowledges the fiduciary duty and obligation of the United States, the state of Hawaii, and the Department of Hawaiian Homelands to all beneficiaries of the Hawaiian Homes Commission Act of 1920 as amended. And more importantly, it summarizes the challenges that plague DHHL from accelerating residential awards. However, had the legislature provided funding to DHHL for lot development of 500 homes each year for the past 40 years, there would be 22,000 homes on our lands today. What is most hurtful to me is that we have lost kupuna who waited, and 2 generations of our children who moved away during this period because they couldn't afford to live here. The estimated cost of lot development on Oahu is $150,000 and rising. This $600 million equates to approximately 4,000 homes, leaving over 7,000 applicants on the Oahu residential wait list, which is at 11,007, and 12,482 on the other islands as of the end of December 2021. This bill and its companion bill, SB 3359 in the Senate, is unprecedented, because for the first time in over 100 years since the HHCA was enacted, DHHL and beneficiaries of the Hawaiian Homelands Trust didn't have to beg for these funds. During my testimony on January 31st on SB 2608 to the Senate committee, I made some strong statements. They were meant to be. I sincerely hope that House Speaker Saiki's statement, members, it is time to give the Department of Hawaiian Homelands the resources it needs to fulfill its fiduciary duty, is echoed in the Senate. I strongly urge you to pass this bill.
It's been 2 minutes. Can you start to conclude?
Yes, I strongly urge you to pass this bill as your renewed commitment, not only to the beneficiaries of the HHCA, but also to our children and grandchildren who are waiting. Make a mahalo nui for allowing me this space and your time. Mahalo.
Thank you. Members, any questions? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to our last bill, HB 1870, relating to the judiciary's Olelo Hawaii initiatives. We have one testifier here today, an individual. Kahea, are you there? Kahea Faria. Oh, we're out of luck. No testifiers, but we have 5 testimonies submitted in support with budget and finance with comments. I suppose that's it. Let's recess for decision making. Recess. Judiciary and Hawaiian Affairs. It is Thursday, February 2nd. We are.
Okay. Thank you very much. We reconvened for decision making on a number of House bills. First up is House Bill 1624 related to crime victim compensation fee. Chair's recommendation is that this bill be amended to require that if judges do not find the defendant to pay the crime victim compensation fund, that the judiciary out of its budget will pay 1/2 of that amount to the crime victim compensation fund. Members, any questions or comments? Okay, seeing none, Vice Chair, as amended.
Rep. Kobayashi has a question.
Oh, I'm sorry, Representative Kobayashi.
So the problem with this bill apparently first was our requirement that those with nothing are going to have to pay this fee. So the remedy to that was to require those with nothing to pay half. So I'll be voting no on this.
That's not an accurate representation. Chair, do you want to re-explain your amendments to the bill?
The amendment, the recommendation is that if the judiciary chooses not to fine the defendant that they must pay the crime victim compensation fee, the judiciary itself, out of its own budget, would pay 1/2 the fee to the crime compensation fund.
Yeah, that's
So
exactly what I said.
This is an effort to, I guess, have judiciary realize what its judges are doing.
And the people with nothing are still going to pay half though on this.
Nope, they're paying nothing.
No, the victim will pay nothing. So the judge can find that the victim will not have to pay the crime compensation fee, but in lieu of that, judiciary out of its budget will pay 1/2 of the fee to the crime compensation fund. So the crime compensation fund gets something as a result of the judgment.
And what's the logic on that?
The logic on that is to make to have the judiciary realize what its judges are doing.
Sure.
Chair, I can further expound if you'd like.
Is that satisfactory, Representative Kobayashi?
Sorry, I don't understand the question. Satisfactory for what purpose?
Are you satisfied with my answer to your question?
I understand your answer. Yeah, I do.
Okay, thank you. Okay, then members on HB 1624 recommendation is as amended. Vice Chair.
Chair's recommendation is to pass HB 1624 with amendments. Chair and Vice Chair vote aye. Representative Ichiyama.
Aye.
Representative Kobayashi.
Aye.
Representative Lopresti. Excused. Representative Lowen. Excused. Representative McKelvey. Excused. Rep. Nakamura.
Aye.
Rep. Takumi. Rep. Takumi. Aye. Rep. Takumi is aye. Rep. Todd.
Aye.
Rep. Tokioka.
Reservations.
Rep. Ward. Excused. Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Okay, thank you very much. Members, House Bill 1625 related to the Crime Victim Compensation Special Fund. Chair's recommendation is technical change on page 9, line 3. It should read sections 2 and 3. And also to defect date the bill January 1st, 2022. Members, any questions or comments? Vice Chair as amended.
Chair's recommendation is to pass HB 1625 with amendments noting the previously excused members. Any members voting with reservations? Sorry, noting the presence of Representative McKelvey. Any members voting with reservations? Any members voting no? Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Okay, thank you very much. Members, House Bill 1690 related to child passenger restraint systems. Chair's recommendations that we adopt the amendments proposed by Kapiolani Medical Center regarding the increase in age for the booster sheets. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, as amended, Vice Chair.
Chair's recommendation is to pass HB 1690 with amendments, noting the previously excused members. Any members voting with reservations? Any members voting no? Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Okay, thank you. HB 1692 related to mobile electronic devices. Author has requested that we keep the bill moving with blank amounts. Chair's recommendation is to move it out as is. Members, any questions or comments?
Can you hear me, Chair? You have blank appropriation lines in the bill?
The fines are blank.
Ah, okay, never mind. Okay, do with what you will.
Okay. Members, any other questions or comments?
I have a question, Chair.
Representative Tokioka.
I'm assuming the blank amount for the fine would go up and not down.
That
or
is my assumption as well, but I leave it up to Chair Aquino to work with finance on that as author of the bill.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Members, any other questions or comments? Not, Vice Chair, as is.
Chair's recommendation is to pass HB 1692 as is, noting the previously excused members. Any members voting with reservations? Any members voting no? Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Thank you very much. HB 1886 related to controlled substances. Recommendations to move this forward with a effective date, January 1st, 2022. Members, any questions or comments? Seeing none, Vice Chair as amended.
Chair's recommendation is to pass HB 1886 with amendments, noting the previously excused members. Any members voting with reservations? Any members voting no? Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Okay. Thank you very much. Members, HB 1965 relating to property forfeiture. Recommendations to move this forward with a effective date, January 1st, 2022. Members, any questions or comments? Seeing none, Vice Chair as amended.
Chair's recommendation is to pass HB 1965 with amendments, noting the previously excused members. Any members voting with reservations? Any members voting no?
No.
No.
Any other members voting no?
No vote for also.
Sorry, too many people.
No for me and Tokioka.
No for Chris, no for Todd and Tokioka. Let's see. Your recommendation is adopted.
Okay, thank you very much. HB 2073, making appropriations for claims against the state, its officers or employees. Chair's recommendation is to move this forward as is. Members, any questions or comments? Seeing none, Vice Chair as is.
Chair's recommendation is to pass HB 2073 as is, noting the previously excused members. Any members voting with reservations? Rep. McKelvey with reservations.
No vote, please, on this measure.
Okay. Any members voting with reservations first? Okay. Any members voting no? Rep. McKelvey with a no. Anyone else? Okay, Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Okay, thank you very much. HB 1777 relating to commercial sexual exploitation of children. The technical notes indicate that department on page 2, line 18, and page 6, line 10 and 13 should be changed to Department of Attorney General as opposed to just the department. Technical amendments needed for clarity, consistency, and style. Also, including the Attorney General proposed amendments. Members, any questions or comments? If not, Vice Chair, as amended.
The Chair's recommendation is to pass HB 1777 with amendments, noting the previously excused members. Any members voting with reservations? Any members voting no? Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Okay, thank you very much. HB 2077 relate to the employees of the Department of Attorney General. Recommendations to move this forward with effective date January 1st, 2022. Members, any questions or comments? Seeing none, Vice Chair, as amended.
Chair's recommendation is to pass HB 2077 with amendments, noting the previously excused members. Any members voting with reservations? Reservations for Rep. Nakamura. Reservations for Rep. Tokioka.
Me also.
For Rep. Todd. Any other members voting with reservations? Rep. McKelvey. I will also be voting with reservations. Any other members? Any members voting no? Okay, Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Okay, thank you very much, members. HB 2078, making the emergency appropriation to the Department of Attorney General. Recommendations to also send this out with effect date January 1st, 2022. Members, any questions or comments? Seeing none, Vice Chair, as amended.
Chair's recommendation is to pass HB 2078 with amendments, noting the previously excused members. Any members voting with reservations? Any members voting no? Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Okay, thank you very much. HB 1759 related to legal services for low-income immigrants. Chair's recommendation is to pass this out as is. Members, any questions or comments? Representative McKelvey. Your microphone is off.
Sorry about that. The appropriation amount in there, is it blank still, or is there an amount in the?
Yeah, the appropriation currently blank.
Okay, without a defective date, I'm probably gonna go WR on it, if that's okay.
Okay, thank you. Members, any other questions or comments? Okay. Seeing none, Vice Chair, as is.
Chair's recommendation is to pass HB 1759 as is, noting the previously excused members and the reservations of Representative McKelvey. Any other members voting with reservations? Any members voting no? Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Okay, thank you very much. HB 1843 related to civil legal services. Chair's recommendation is I remove names of organizations in section 1. So deleting line 6 through 11. That'd be all. Members, any questions or comments? Seeing none, Vice Chair, as amended.
Chair's recommendation is to pass HB 1843 with amendments, noting the previously excused members. Any members voting with reservations? Any members voting no? Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Okay, thank you very much. HB 1761 related to identification cards. Technical note on this is department on page 8, line 17 should be changed to the Department of Transportation. Also, I send this out with effect date January 1st, 2022. Members, any questions or comments? Seeing none, as amended, Vice Chair.
Chair's recommendation is to pass HB 1761 with amendments, noting the previously excused members. Any members voting with reservations? Any members voting no? Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Okay, thank you very much. House Bill 2421 relate to Women's Court. Chair's recommendation is that we move this out as is. Members, any questions or comments? Seeing none, Vice Chair, as amended.
Chair's recommendation,
Unamended, I'm sorry.
Chair's recommendation is to pass HB 2421 as is, noting the previously excused members. Any members voting with reservations? Any members voting no? Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Okay, thank you very much. HB 1883 related to elections. Chair's recommendation to send this out with effect date January 1st, 2022. Members, any questions or comments? Seeing none, Vice Chair, as amended.
Chair's recommendation is to pass HB 1883 with amendments, noting the previously excused members. Any members voting with reservations? Any members voting no? Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Okay, thank you very much. HB 1890 related to elections. Since there was no testimony on this matter, I think I will defer this bill. Members, any questions or comments? Okay, thank you.
Bill, Chair.
Yes.
Okay, well, that's truly a lesson for the rest of us. Thank you.
Excuse me? Okay, HB 2511 related to the Department of Hawaiian Homelands. Chair's recommendation is that, I'm sorry, technical change, language on the appropriation seating on page 5, lines 12 to 13 should be moved to section 4. So Chair's recommendation is to move it with those amendments. Members, any questions or comments? Seeing none, Vice Chair, as amended.
Chair's recommendation is to pass HB 2511 with amendments, noting the previously excused members. Any members voting with reservations? Any members voting no? Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Okay, thank you very much. And finally, HB 1870 related to the judiciary's Olelo Hawaii initiatives. Chair's recommendation is to send this out effective date January 1st, 2022. Members, any questions or comments? Seeing none, Vice Chair, as amended.
Chair's recommendation is to pass HB 1870 with amendments, noting the previously excused members. Any members voting with reservations? Any members voting no? Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Hey, thank you very much. Members, next hearing probably be on Tuesday. We are adjourned. Thank you.